With the flick of her pen, she writes,
Chapter 14. I like hot chocolate. Rosalie went down to the lobby very carefully, checking around her to see if anyone was following her. Nothing, she noted as she made her way to the hot chocolate bar. There was everything necessary to make a whippy, frothy cup of cocoa goodness. She piled on marshmallows and poured almond milk, heaping in a full tablespoon of the hot cocoa powder. Whisking, stirring, sipping to make sure the flavors were just right, and then a dollop of whipped cashew cream and a dash of nutmeg winter delight spice mix. Perfect. She prided herself on her hot chocolate making skills. She was surprised Calvin hadn't joined her there at the thought of it. The little things, she said, wiping whipped cream off the end of her nose. I've got you now, she heard a terse voice coming from behind the front desk. You've got nothing of the kind, a female voice said. Oh, now then you better get out while the getting is good. The terse voice, otherwise known as management only, said, slamming a drawer. And don't think you're going to get paid any last wages after what you pulled, the old man growled. The door to the office opened, and a young woman, barely old enough to be working there anyway, came out with a napkin held to her face. She blotted tears and sniffled, blowing her nose into the napkin and grabbing a tissue from the box on the front desk. You've got no reason to do this. The girl banged her hand against Management Only's door and then came out from behind the desk. Brushing past Rosalie as she ran past and sniffling and carrying on as she made her way down the stairs to the back patio and the fire pit. Rosalie went to the window and could see the young girl being cajoled by a much older than her pool boy. They held each other closely, and the girl broke away. She started down the marked path to the Hidden Foot Tavern, and Rosalie felt compelled to follow. Darn it, she thought. She needed to let Calvin know what was going on, but there was no time. She felt this little outburst had something to do with the cream of mountain mushroom soup and the note the bear server had given them on their departure from the cabin. Rosalie made the quick decision and started down the marked path herself, keeping a safe distance from the girl. She wasn't alone, as most witches weren't, since Catomancy, Cat Wizard, and Familiar Extraordinaire was following close behind. He'd sensed something was up as soon as he heard the words hot chocolate come out of Rosalie's mouth, for it was in her quest to soothe her hunger that she always got in the most trouble. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3. Rosalie followed the girl until suddenly the girl was there no more. The trail was empty except for a young man walking a very small poodle on a tiny leash. Hey, Rosalie thought, what happened to no pets allowed? The young man also ducked away and was gone as soon as he saw Rosalie watching him from afar. Why is everyone disappearing, she wondered, as she followed the footsteps along the damp trail. It was then she felt herself being pulled downward, and a sprinkling of magical dust surrounded her. I've got you now, the old fairy goddess Cantinkara said with glee. 1 is good, 2 even better, but 3 will serve me to the letter, she said, closing the fairy portal and imagining what a fun time was to be had with not 1, but 3 mortals at her leisure. Chapter 15. An old cat knows how. Catomancy was certain that Rosalie had been right there, and now she was gone. He slinked over to the part of the trail where he'd last seen her, and he felt it. He smelled it, too. Fairy sparkle. The kind used to bewitch humans. He knew that smell well. An old cat can tell. His fur bristled along his back. He had no time to waste before the remnants of the portal might be moved at any time by the fairy. He had to act fast. He held his breath and made himself very transparent. And then he used his cat senses to make out the last little space of opening that was the door where Rosalie had slipped through. And he was in. And there she was, being talked to by the fairy goddess. This goddess wanted the mortals to go pick berries and bring them back to her, Oh, heck, he thought, this fairy meant to have them here for who knows how long doing her bidding. There was even a little dog that had been pulled through the gate, and Canton Cara had attached a little wheeled basket to its hindquarters so it could pull along the berry harvest. How was he, an old cat wizard, going to outsmart this beguiling fae? And how was he, an old cat wizard, going to get not one, but 3 plus a dog up and out of this bewitchery? Well, he always had a way. Now to act upon it. There was no time to waste, as the bewitching spell of Canton Cara was taking over the human senses, and all notions of right and wrong were veiled. Their only thought was berry picking, and taking their sweet time doing it, too. This could take eons, Catomancy thought, as he recalled the tale his father had told him about someone who had been pulled into the fairylands as a child and hadn't been allowed to leave until 100 mortal years had passed. Well, he didn't want himself or these people, least of all Rosalie, to spend one more minute here. He mewed and then made a beeline for the fairy. Looking pitiful and dejected, he hoped to get in her good graces. If he could get close enough to her, he could get a paw full of the enchanting dust. With that, he could try to open his own portal and get the humans out. They were already aimlessly searching for berries and placing them in the dog's basket. There was no time to waste. "Well, aren't you a poor dear?" Canton Cara said, looking down at a bewitched Catomancy, who appeared as a small, dejected little kitten to her. "Come here, you little fur ball, and keep me company," she said, excited to maybe have a new friend. Catomancy jumped on her lap as she sat on the nearest toadstool to take a break. He had to be very careful. She pet his soft fur and nuzzled him to her. "What a sweet dear you are," she said, forgetting to keep an eye on the humans and the dog. And then it happened. The dog with the basket jumped excitedly at the Catomancy glamour kitten. Catomancy dashed left and then right, avoiding the bouncy energy of the small dog. The basket of berries tipped and spilled. The fairy jumped up to scold the dog, and then he took his chance. He dashed his cat paw into the bag of spell dust at Canton Cara's waist. She was none the wiser, having her full attention on the disarray of the dog basket and spilled berries. Catomancy threw some sparkle dust at a space by a little hawthorn tree, and a sparkly opening appeared. He moved quickly as he surrounded the 3 humans and the dog. He scratched and spat and clawed, pushing them towards the opening. He clawed their ankles and scratched at their shoes, waking them enough from their stupor so that they moved towards the portal. And then his final move to push them through, he created a fireball with his tail, just like the deep pine elves had shown him how to do. The fireball whizzed by the humans and the dog, and that woke them up enough. They stumbled through the portal opening, just avoiding a huge spark from the fireball, and they fell gasping and bewildered back onto the trail to the Hidden Foot Tavern. Even the little dog sneezed and sputtered as Catomancy ran through the portal opening as it closed behind him. Canton Cara screeched as the opening closed. The humans stood there for a moment, and then, like nothing had ever happened, moved about their business. Catomancy swished around Rosalie's legs until she looked down and finally came to her senses. "What just happened to me?" she said to him. And all the old cat could do was look at her with a knowing and sly cat grin. Chapter 16. If only one could come along. Rosalie came to her senses and patted Catomancy on the head. "Thank you," she said lovingly, "for being you." Catomancy took the praise, meowed a little too wickedly, Rosalie thought, and pounced off into the woods, hot on the trail of something or another. His work was done for now, so might as well play some, he thought, as he caught the aura of a wise old oak and something else. Meep stepped out from behind the oak tree and gazed wisely, or was it haphazardly, at Catomancy. A tree fae was always up to little mischief, Meep thought, as he eyed Catomancy. These two were going to have some fun, as the oak fae rose several feet off the ground with his tiny elven wings. Now, could an elven fae be so tiny and small? Who knows, Catomancy thought. He wasn't privy to every secret of the universe, just the ones that mattered to him now. He changed out of cat form into something more akin to the being he actually was, and then the game was afoot. Meep shushed Catomancy and led him behind the old oak and towards what appeared to be a clearing with something burning in the center. When they approached, they saw a large cauldron simmering something that smelled completely awful. Meep inched closer to the cauldron, peering in to find a huge vat of what appeared to be mushroom soup. "Phew, that smells horrible," Meep said telepathically to Catomancy. Just then a branch cracked, and both Meep and Catomancy darted behind a huge mulberry bush. Looking out between the branches, they saw an elderly but still very nimble Mr. S. dumping a whole basket of mushrooms into the vat. He sputtered out some sort of dark words, but Meep and Catomancy, who were very high vibe, could hardly discern what they were. But at the end of the incantation, a huge, very smelly cloud went up from the soup cauldron. Mr. S. rubbed his taloned hands gleefully and hopped on one foot and then the other. Now to put this soup in the containers and attach the enchanted soup labels. But these enchanted labels had nothing to do with causing fulfilled hunger and satisfied tummies. This soup was caustic to the soul and should be avoided at all costs. Meep and Catomancy had stumbled upon a very important part of the puzzle, and they must get word out to their friends who might be able to stop this dastardly plan. Because with each new batch of mushroom soup, the stakes were far darker and more dangerous. And rather than just causing ill will, this new batch had been enchanted to cause much worse. Things we can't even mention here in this light body of work.